yako ingekaa sana kama yetu. Ni shule tu imefanya yako bado ni. Shule tu imefanya kati ya Serena na bado ni. Yako na sasa nayo kwa yako ni virgin.
Voices Unheard from the Pyrenees to Kibera is a story of two youth-led organizations, one in France and one in Kenya, coming together around a shared question. How can young people affected by climate change be heard by those who make decisions? It is a story of hundreds of emails sent to decision makers, social media posts, radio interviews, meetings with journalists, a public webinar, workshops with young people in Kibera and in the Pyrenees, and repeated efforts to secure meetings with policymakers, following up until doors opened. In 2022, the European Union and the African Union committed to a shared vision for 2030 and highlighted key priorities: actions to preserve the climate, the fight against inequalities, the inclusion of women, young people and the most disadvantaged.
Once again, it's important to ensure that young people and women remain at the very heart of our agenda.
A two-day summit aimed at deepening cooperation on climate action and multilateralism.
In 2026, when looking at the situation on the ground, it is clear that these commitments have not been followed by action. This gap between promises and lived reality is what led us to act. Voices Unheard was created to bring the voice of youth into the spaces where climate policies are shaped.
Kibera. They call it a village. But a village suggests roots, soil, space to breathe. This is Kibera. 1 square mile of iron, earth, and will. Home to 250,000 souls. Some say 500,000. No one really counts. No one wants to. From above, it looks like a scar on the map of Nairobi. But down here, it's a living, breathing heart. Every inch claimed. Every drop of water negotiated. The railway line cuts through its spine, dividing, connecting, indifferent. This is not a place people choose. It's a place people survive. And for now, they survive here, stacked against each other, balanced on the edge of drainage ditch that smells like the end of the world. But even survivalists have its limits. And then the rain comes, not gentle, not merciful. The rain comes like a fist, for 2 days, 3, a week. The Ngong River, usually a joke, a trickle of sewage, remembers it was once a giant. In Kibera, water is always the enemy or the god. There is no in-between. The drainage channels, clogged with plastic and neglect, surrender immediately. The ground, hard as concrete, refuses to drink. So the water does the only thing it can. It rises. It rises into homes made of mud. It dissolves the walls. It lifts latrines from their holes and spreads what should stay buried across the floors when children sleep. Cholera whispers its name. Typhoid writes its address. Families climb onto their roofs. The same iron sheets that baked them yesterday, now the only island between them and their base. They wait, hours, sometimes days. No aid comes, no state help, just the rain and the victims, and the silence of a city that looks away. They call it a flood, a natural disaster, but there's nothing natural about a river choked by trash and victims spread out with it. Nothing natural about a home built on a drainage channel. It only becomes natural once the river takes its natural course, says the newspaper articles, titled, "Splurged Nature Takes Its Course." This is an act of neglect, written in policy and lives of people, sealed in indifference.
Caramany is a small village in the eastern Pyrenees in the south of France, bordering Spain, nestled between the Pyrenees mountain chain and the Mediterranean Sea. It is a rural village shaped by dry landscapes, vineyards, small-scale agriculture, and strong community life. Summers are hot and water is limited, but people are used to it, spending the afternoon in the shade under a tree, waiting for the hottest hours to pass. But since 2022, the situation has become much more serious. The region has faced 3 years of drought, leading the government to declare a water crisis. Caramany has experienced water cuts, and some nearby villages have had to rely on water deliveries by truck. In Caramany, water restrictions affect daily life. Gardens are harder to maintain. Agriculture and wine production are under pressure. Irrigation is limited, and tensions between residents can appear when water becomes scarce. Here, people know that water is a condition for life in the community. They wonder how long they will be able to continue living on this land. Adding to the threat of droughts, wildfires are becoming another major climate risk. In 2025, wildfires burned the neighboring territory, adding another threat to Caramany. Further west in the Pyrenees, Luchon faces another side of the climate crisis. Luchon is a mountain town surrounded by peaks, rivers and forests. It is a place built around water, thermal baths, mountain lakes, rivers, hydroelectricity, skiing and outdoor tourism. Two rivers, La Pique and l'Aune, come down from the mountains and cross the town. For young people, the mountains are part of their daily life. They are linked to work, sport, tourism and identity. But the climate is changing. Snowfall is less predictable. Some winters bring little snow. Other years, heavy snow is followed by a sudden increase in temperatures. In mountain valleys, this can quickly become dangerous. In June 2013, Luchon was hit by a major flood. After heavy snowfall during the winter, a wet spring, sudden warm temperatures and intense rainfall, the rivers rose very quickly. What was normally a mountain river became a violent torrent of mud, stones, branches and tree trunks. The flood damaged homes, roads and infrastructure. Basements filled with water. Streets were covered in mud. People had to take shelter, and once the water went down, the work of cleaning, pumping and rebuilding began. For many residents, the memory is still present. The flood revealed how quickly a climate event can overwhelm the community, and how important warning, preparation and communication really are.
Maida organized a youth climate workshop in Kibera, bringing together more than 30 young people for a day of learning, reflection and dialogue. Through the Climate Fresk game, participants explored the connection between human activity, climate change and the realities communities are facing today. For many, the conversation were deeply personal. The 2024 floods in Kibera left homes destroyed, livelihoods interrupted, and many families struggling to recover. But beyond the challenges, the workshop created a space for young people to share their experiences, imagine solutions, and raise their voices together.
Mafuriko last year ilikuja affect mimi hiyo mafuriko ili affect nilichukua vitu za nyumba manze, maji ilikuja kabisa na vitu kwa nyumba juu hatukai mbali na pali maji unapita, so hiyo maji iliingia kwa nyumba ikachukua vitu. Na pia kuna majirani wenye watoto wao waligonjeka hiyo magonjwa za maji safi mix na maji chafu ya mvua, so watu walikuwa wagonjwa. So mimi nataka tu kuurge government na hizo mashirika zenye na mambo ya climate to include vijana kwa hizi vitu za climate. Mimi na believe vijana wengi wako na ideas na wako na hiyo nguvu na mambo ya climate. Mimi na believe vijana wengi wako na solutions na mambo ya climate na wako na hiyo tamu ya kuchange ya kukua climate change makers.
And this is a problem we need to solve, and we need to solve it now. And how are we going to do it? That's a question I ask myself all the time. For us, especially in Kenya, we have policies, really good policies that if are implemented will bring change. And our only problem is we don't have enough young people in these policy places. We are not given the chances, we are not given the opportunities. Policy makers need to hear from us, young people on the ground, people who have been affected by floods, people who know what it feels like for our home not to feel at home when floods come, because it pains us every time. So I think we should involve young people in these places.
Hi guys, my name is Buthaina Asindwa. I'm a young leader and a youth leader from Kibera, and my message to policy makers and donors, especially in the green economy and in climate financing, is that they should really put more support in terms of finances, cash and capacity building into the grassroots initiatives in informal settlements and other underserved communities, because these are the immediate responders to disasters. And when these people are empowered and capacity built, both in terms of skills and finances, it becomes easier for them to manage the risks associated with the natural disaster and other induced disasters. So these people, like instead of using a lot of bureaucratic agencies, processes and organizations, I feel like more support in terms of cash and skills should be given to them without a lot of intermediaries and intermediates in between, so that in case of these impromptu disasters, they have the immediate capacity and the immediate skills and the immediate everything to respond to these disasters on time. And these are the people who are ground at the very core of where these disasters are happening. So I feel like when they have the capacity to respond immediately, it will save more lives, it will reduce the damage to property, it will reduce the damage to the environment. So I feel like whenever policies are being made and donors want to finance anything to do with climate change mitigation, disasters and risks, they should look for systems that deal with the grassroots level initiatives and organization without a lot of bureaucratic and too many intermediaries and intermediates in between, so that, like, when time is saved, less lives are lost, less property is damaged, and the environment is able to be saved more timely. Yeah.
On the same day, Petite Graine organized a climate workshop in Caramany. Using the methodology of the climate Fresk, participants connected the science of climate change with their own daily experiences. The workshop opened discussions on drought, water restrictions, pressure on agriculture, and uncertainty about the future of the village. We also interviewed Christophe Malaprade, mayor of Foss, a neighboring village of Caramany. He is also chair of the local public water management board. His insights were extremely valuable in understanding the pressure drought places on water resources and how local authorities must adapt to these changing conditions.
La question de l'eau est une question d'actualité pour ici, parce que ça fait 3 ans qu'on vit la sécheresse et que ça impacte tout le monde. Nous, on avait à l'époque 2 sources et un forage. Les sources sont taries. On n'a plus qu'un forage qui donne 5 mètres cubes sur 24 heures, donc c'est très très peu. Heureusement qu'on n'est que 50 habitants, parce que sinon ça ne suffirait pas. L'année dernière, on a dû faire appel à des camions par une entreprise pour nous remplir les réservoirs d'eau, par exemple. Quand on dit il a plu un peu, on a tellement eu peu de pluie pendant 3 ans, donc le peu de pluie qu'on a eu, on a dansé. Mais c'était rien.
C'était rien, ouais.
Non, c'était pas assez du tout.
Okay.
Ça fait du bien à la nature, en surface, mais pour une nappe, ça n'a rien fait.
Et en lisant la presse, je vois qu'il y a des scénarios un peu catastrophes qui disent que cette région ne sera plus habitable d'ici 10 ans. Qu'est-ce que tu penses de ce genre de récit? Est-ce que tu y crois ou est-ce que tu penses qu'il y a pas de l'espoir pour s'adapter?
J'ai été faire une randonnée dimanche dernier. On est arrivé en randonnée sur un village abandonné. Il y en a un autre au-dessus des Housses. Pourquoi ils ont été abandonnés, ces villages? À cause de l'eau. Parce que la ressource en eau était compliquée à gérer et au bout d'un moment, il n'y avait plus d'eau et ça peut nous arriver. Le plus dur, c'est à changer les habitudes des gens âgés, par exemple, ceux qui font les jardins. Je me suis battu encore cet été pour essayer de le faire en sorte qu'il n'arrose pas en pleine journée, qu'il respecte les arrêtés préfectoraux.
C'est 20h, non, c'est ça?
Alors,
21h.
Chaque commune peut décider de 2 jours par semaine d'arrosage entre 18h et 2h du matin, je crois. Okay. Il y en a qui le font plutôt le matin, qui ne respectent pas tout à fait ça. Et, le but étant de petit à petit amener les gens à changer leurs habitudes, mais c'est très très compliqué. Quelqu'un qui a fait son jardin pendant 50 ans de la même façon, d'un coup tu vas lui demander de pailler, il ne va pas comprendre. Et parce que ici, qu'est-ce qu'ils font pour arroser? Il y a un canal, ils barrent le canal et ils inondent, rang par rang, et ils inondent tout le jardin, en plein cagnard, donc ça s'évapore, ouais. Et puis après il faut qu'ils inondent, ils arrêtent. Mais ils ont coupé le canal pendant 1 heure. Et ils font ça, si tu les laisses faire, ils font ça tous les jours. Ouais.
Donc si chaque parcelle fait ça...
Oui, au lieu de pailler ses rangs, ouais. Et puis d'arroser 2 fois par semaine, ça suffit. Ouais. Voilà. Et t'arroses le soir.
Et t'arroses au pied, quoi, tu n'arroses pas tout.
Voilà. Mais ça demande vraiment... Alors, on ne peut pas les contraindre, mais on peut leur limiter l'accès à l'eau. Mais là, ça crée des conflits après. Donc, il y a eu des conflits, nous. On a un canal qui vient d'une petite rivière qui coule dans la vallée de la forêt de Boucheville, là. Et moi, je surveille. Donc, le canal, il est vital pour les jardins et on a un bassin d'essai qu'on transforme en piscine d'été. Mais moi, dès que je vois que la rivière baisse trop et que entre la prise d'eau du canal et le rejet de cette eau dans cette même rivière, quand je vois que le bout qu'on occulte commence à s'assécher, je diminue le canal, voire je le ferme. Ouais. Voilà. Donc on essaie de gérer ça en collaboration même avec la police de l'eau, que j'appelle de temps en temps pour avoir des conseils. Ils viennent voir sur le terrain. Et j'ai essayé de diminuer les conflits qu'on avait avec les villages en dessous. Parce que les villages en dessous ont toujours considéré que s'ils n'avaient plus d'eau à un moment donné, c'était pas la sécheresse, c'était nous. Parce qu'il y avait le canal au-dessus. Okay. Donc nous, on a fait des travaux sur ce canal. On a essayé de détanchéifier au maximum pour avoir moins de pertes possibles. Parce qu'avant, par exemple, quand il y avait de l'eau il y a 40 ans, ils inondaient les champs l'été. Ils arrosaient les champs pour que l'herbe soit plus verte. Ça, on ne peut plus faire. Ouais.
Mais de toute façon, on n'a plus le droit, là.
Non. Ouais. Non, mais entre ce qu'on a le droit de faire...
Ce que les gens font.
Et ce que les gens font.
Ouais.
Il y a des jardins dans un village à côté, je ne dirais pas où ni qui, mais où tu vois, malgré les restrictions, il y a 150 pieds de tomates qui sont arrosés tous les jours. Comme les moyens de l'État ont drastiquement diminué avec le non-remplacement des fonctionnaires, avec leur politique de baisse de dotation, j'en sais rien, il n'y a plus assez de fonctionnaires pour contrôler tout ça. Moi, la police de l'eau, elle est passée parce que le maire du village en dessous avait dénoncé en pensant que c'était nous qui prenions l'eau, donc ils sont déplacés sur dénonciation, mais sinon, ils ne viennent pas. Parce qu'ils sont pas assez nombreux, ou parce qu'ils ne sont pas bien accueillis, je ne sais pas. Mais dans les faits, j'arrête pas de dire, moi, à ceux qui dérogent aux règles, de dire, je vous aurais prévenu, de toute façon, si vous êtes contrôlé, c'est 1 500 € d'amende, mais il n'y a pas de contrôle. Donc...
oui, que devraient faire les pouvoirs publics
Alors, on est en train de prendre conscience que si on ne fait rien, si on ne va pas plus vite que ce qu'on fait à l'heure actuelle, le problème, il est devant nous et il va s'accentuer. C'est-à-dire que mon village, il y a à peu près 50 habitants, c'est tendu avec l'eau, mais ça passe encore limite, mais ça passe. Mais s'il y a 2-3 maisons qui se font en plus, ça va plus passer, et puis la ressource, elle va baisser de toute façon, puisque la sécheresse, ça ne va pas s'arrêter demain. Il faut faire des recherches de ressources supplémentaires. Ça coûte assez cher. J'ai vu, moi, ce qui avait été fait au niveau du village, au temps du dernier forage qui est en activité, c'est un investissement de l'ordre de 120 000 €. Okay.
Est-ce qu'on est sûr qu'il y a de l'eau
en étude, on n'est jamais sûr. Ouais. Donc, en gros, il n'y a pas 36 000 solutions. Il faut plus de moyens alloués à l'eau et à l'assainissement qu'avant. Puisqu'on a plus de problèmes, la sécheresse, les réseaux vieillissants et les investissements si on veut faire face aux enjeux qui viennent de là. C'est en train de resserrer les liens, tout ça. Oui, c'est vrai. Parce que les gens en prennent conscience. Et alors, faire une forme de démocratie participative, c'est une idée que j'ai en tête. Sauf que je trouve que pour l'instant, c'est bien joli, mais les institutions n'ont pas changé les règles. Donc quel que soit le mode de consultation que tu fasses au niveau de la population, une décision sera toujours prise par un conseil municipal et les conseillers votent ce qu'ils veulent. Donc s'ils veulent respecter le desiderata de sa population, il va le respecter. S'il ne veut pas, il ne va pas le respecter. Donc c'est pas encore acté tout ça.
In the Pyrenees, we also gathered testimonies from young people exposed to climate risks. Marion from Caramany shared her perspective on drought, water restrictions and the future of her village, while Sébastien and Valentin spoke about the floods in Luchon and what it means to live in a valley where the risk can return.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Marion, j'ai 32 ans, j'habite dans un petit village qui s'appelle Caramany, c'est dans le sud de la France. Et donc cette vidéo c'est parce que voilà, on a fait la fresque du climat avec Romane Morocha de l'association Petite Graine et c'était une super expérience, un moment de rencontre entre les habitants du village. Et si Caramany a été choisi, c'est parce qu'il est face à la problématique de la sécheresse. Les Pyrénées-Orientales, dans le sud de la France, c'est un département qui est de plus en plus concerné par la problématique de la sécheresse, du manque d'eau. C'est une région qui vit beaucoup des vignes, des fruits, des légumes, et il y a des restrictions très importantes d'eau. Voilà, on n'a plus le droit d'arroser les jardins potagers privés, on n'a pas le droit de les arroser. Il y a des coupures des fois à Caramany, il y a déjà eu une coupure d'eau potable dans le village. Donc tout ça, ça transforme la société, les rapports entre les gens dans des petits villages. C'est un tout petit village de 100 habitants. Voilà, donc on en est à essayer de prendre conscience. Il y a encore pas tout à fait une conscience collective de cette problématique. Il y a beaucoup de gens qui pensent pas du tout à l'eau, qui font pas d'économie d'eau, mais il y a aussi beaucoup de gens qui deviennent climato-anxieux, qui savent pas comment réguler la problématique de l'eau. Il n'y a pas beaucoup de choses mises en place pour récolter l'eau. Les rivières sont assez polluées. Il n'y a pas du tout de politique collective de récupération des eaux usées des habitants, par exemple, pour arroser les plantes du village, ça pourrait être mis en œuvre. Il n'y a pas encore d'adaptation du type de plantes qu'on met dans les espaces verts des villes, qui sont moins énergivores en eau, qui sont adaptés au climat. On n'a pas encore du tout fait, j'ai l'impression, cette transition, et voilà, on en prend conscience assez doucement. Donc c'est sûr que ça passe par des actions d'éducation, et ça part à l'école aussi, c'est très important. Mais voilà, c'est particulier d'habiter dans un endroit où il y a de la sécheresse, où il y a la peur de voir l'herbe dès le mois de février qui est toute brûlée au bord des chemins déjà. Là, depuis quelques semaines, il se passe quelque chose qui ne s'est pas passé depuis des années, depuis 4 ans, c'est qu'il pleut. Il pleut énormément. Donc là, vous entendez peut-être le bruit de l'eau. C'est le ruisseau qui est en bas de chez moi, où voilà, il y a de l'eau dans le ruisseau et ça fait 3 ans qu'il n'y avait pas eu d'eau dedans. Il y a beaucoup d'inondations du coup, là, dans la région. On est en alerte orange, il y a des très 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 fortes pluies, très violentes, qui ont causé beaucoup d'éboulements. L'eau ne peut pas endiguer le sol ne peut pas endiguer toute l'eau qui coule. Elle coule trop fort, trop vite. Les nappes sont vides, mais n'absorbent pas l'eau qui coule. Donc on est confronté à des nouvelles problématiques d'intempéries très violentes qui créent énormément de dégâts. Il y a beaucoup d'inondations, en fait. Normalement, c'est des maisons qui ne sont pas en zone inondable, mais le sol, du coup, on découvre qu'il y a des ruissellements. Donc il y a ce changement climatique aussi dans la sécheresse versus intempéries très violentes qui émergent. C'est quelque chose de très nouveau et on ne sait pas encore comment réagir face à ça. Heureusement, il y a des perspectives qui existent, il y a des jeunes qui s'installent dans les villages un peu désertifiés et qui ont des idées. Moi, par exemple, je vais m'inscrire au conseil municipal de mon village pour faire partie de la liste et puis d'essayer de proposer des solutions concrètes pour essayer de s'adapter à la transition écologique de notre monde. On est plusieurs jeunes du village à porter des projets comme ça pour essayer de préparer des solutions. Faut qu'on se renseigne. On n'y connaît rien, c'est pas notre métier, donc on a besoin de pouvoir communiquer avec des gens compétents, des ingénieurs, de savoir quelles ressources existent pour s'adapter à ces nouvelles problématiques.
C'est plus possible qu'on ait des décisions qui soient qu'on soit dépendant finalement de toutes ces tous ces poéticiens qui sont déconnectés de la réalité qu'on vit tous les jours et qui n'est pas la leur, qui ne connaissent pas. Et donc pour ça, ce qu'il faudrait faire, une des solutions, ça pourrait être d'impliquer les communautés locales avec des gens de tout âge qui représenteraient le futur, mais aussi pour ceux qui ont plus d'expérience, leur connaissance, leur expérience finalement du terrain. Et avec, en intégrant comme ça tous les acteurs locaux, pourraient non plus être comme actuellement spectateurs des politiques et des plans mis en place par l'État, mais les habitants des communes pourraient devenir acteurs et responsables, impliqués dans les actions et dans le futur de leur commune.
Bonjour, je voudrais vous parler des inondations de Luchon qui ont déjà eu lieu il y a quelques années mais qui restent un événement assez traumatisant. Je m'en souviens très bien de ces torrents de boue qui ont dévalé la montagne, qui ont tapé les maisons, qui ont emporté tout sur leur passage, dont de nombreux véhicules. Ce fut vraiment un moment très difficile à vivre, mais encore plus que ces dégâts matériels, ce qui n'a pas été simple, c'est cet abandon total que nous avons eu de la part des autorités. Ils ne nous ont pas prévenus, il y a eu très peu de secours sur le moment. Que vraiment la population a été livrée à elle-même, et c'est vraiment ce dont je me souviens, ce sentiment d'abandon. Donc voilà, par mon témoignage, ce que j'espère, que les mentalités vont évoluer. Je vous remercie.
Young people are speaking, and here in Kibera, young people are speaking loudly. They are talking to their community, their leaders and their policy makers. They are sharing about their realities, their solution and their vision for a more brighter and climate resilient future. Here are their voices and here are their messages.
We, the young people of Kibera, turned our pain to paper, our testimony to text. 5 recommendations, 5 levers to pull before the next flood drowns the last of our patience. 1. Youth climate resilience hubs. Not promises, bricks, tools, and payrolls for those who dig the drains. 2. A mandatory 30% youth seat at every climate table, co-decision, not consultation. 3. A county-level youth climate fund, microgrants, no bureaucracy. Let them build what they have already designed. 4. Integrate youth into early warning systems and stop the forced evictions. Replace them with a relocation protocol that has a soul. 5. Transnational exchange. Kibera to the Pyrenees. A shared struggle. A shared solution.
Against the floods in Luchon, youth call for early warning systems by extending the national flood forecasting system to cover the valley so that floods can be predicted 24 hours in advance. They also recommend installing water level sensors in homes located next to the rivers, and finally preventively lowering mountain lakes levels to anticipate the snowmelt in spring. Against the drought in Caramany, youth call for reusing local wastewater, installing private and collective rainwater harvesters, adapting agriculture to drought by planting drought-resistant species, regenerating soils, and using drip irrigation. They also recommend raising children's awareness of the value of water from an early age in school and organizing public awareness raising events. One common recommendation is to create local committees where residents can take part in decisions on climate and environmental issues.
To connect this local experience with wider movements, we organized an online webinar on youth-led climate advocacy. We invited speakers from WECF, the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change. The webinar helped us learn from other organizations working on climate justice, community action, and youth participation. It also showed that the challenges facing Kibera and the Pyrenees are a part of a much wider struggle for meaningful youth involvement.
Our collective experience as WECF is that working as part of a network is great to enhance advocacy and influence capacities, just because as a group, NGOs are stronger together. I mean, it might sound a little bit cheesy, but it's the truth. It makes it easier to put together reports, press releases, any kind of advocacy documents that could be put together. When it comes as a union of voices, it just has a lot more strength and it can be put forward to policymakers. Also, WCF is very much involved in the Women and Gender constituency, one of the official constituencies in the UNFCCC process. So there are several of them, including one for the youth, which is called Yongo. Being involved in the official constituency is also extremely useful to bring forward your ideas and your advocacy points in the context of climate negotiations. Advice that I would give to young climate advocates and young and youth-focused NGOs that are trying to have more impact in climate negotiations and climate policies in general is just try to approach and get involved in networks as much as possible, whether it be youth advocacy network, at any kind of level, national, regional, or international level. I've personally been approached by the Conference of the Youth, for example, that is quite widespread from what I know. And they also train young people to be more actively involved in climate negotiations.
If we really want these individuals, these lawmakers, to take us serious in the climate space, we must be 100%, we must 100% check our community engagement strategy. When that is done, the community would be the one to drive that policy. They'll be the ones to drive that. In fact, you can go and do other projects. You realize that, oh, this policy has been passed into law. Oh, I didn't even know, I've forgotten about this project. But because the community individuals care so much, they follow it through and ensure that it was passed into law. So these
are for us in Pacta, one of the things in engaging young people and ensuring that there is effective engagement and continuous has been through trainings. And for the last 5 years, we carved an initiative called the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice. So this initiative, it's a school that has got a whole curriculum that molds the young people who are doing locally led climate actions on the ground, people who have taken up activities and they have evidence, and there is something that is ongoing at the ground level for them, and connecting that with the grassroots. Also, we train them on how to position themselves and get to attract resources and also get to make a difference. And one of the things we have seen in the past 5 years, these young people have gone again back to their communities and they have really made impact and changes. And this is something we measure. Our monitoring and evaluation has been doing a great job. And we have seen most of them negotiating for their governments at the UNFCCC level. We have seen others who have been taken up by the African Union to be part of their youth advocacy team around climate justice. We have seen some of them engaging their governments directly and connecting us to see the impact we can change at the national level in their countries. So this is something that we have shaped, and as we go to the 6th cohort, we now have been looking at putting the alumni together and now monitoring further how now they can also train other people and other young people at the grassroots level, so that we have now that snowball effect, if I would call it that. Thank you.
In January 2026, Petite Graine traveled to Nairobi to visit Maida CBO and continue the project together on the ground. The visit began with watching sessions and a walk through Kibera. We saw the density of the settlement, the housing challenges, the waste accumulation, and the water infrastructure marked by the blue Shefco pylons. We also saw how climate vulnerability is connected to everyday infrastructure, water access, drainage, sanitation, housing, and public service. During the visit, we organized a workshop on flood preparedness with professionals from St. John Ambulance. Young participants learned practical skills, how to respond during a flood, how to avoid dangerous flood water, how to place someone in the recovery position, how to perform CPR, and how to prepare a household before disaster strikes. The second part of the workshop focused on youth and climate advocacy. Participants discussed how to engage public authorities, defend their rights, and hold decision makers accountable. We also met decision makers, including the Executive Office of the President on Marginalized and Minority Affairs Unit and the EU Delegation to Kenya. We visited local initiatives already building resilience from within Kibera, including Whispers Champion Youth Initiative, a community group that transformed a dump site into an urban farming space using vertical farming and recycled plastic.
We do waste collection in houses. So after we've collected the waste from the houses, we bring it to one location up there. Yeah. Then we sort everything out. Okay. The food waste, we have compost, and we also sell some to, I don't know what they do with it, but we also sell some. Then plastic we sell, metal we sell. Okay. But there are some things you can't sell, like the packaging. Yeah. This kind of packaging. So instead of throwing them away, we decided to do this. Yeah.
We also met Brian, a community mobilizer and a youth leader, working with young people through sports. He walked us through Kibera and shared his experience of the floods. His testimony helped us understand how climate risk is lived street by street, home by home, and how local leaders often become first responders in moments of crisis.
Well, there was a heavy rain. It almost rained for 4 hours. Then by the time it reached morning, we had like several deaths. Yeah. We had a woman and a child being carried. We had the 2 guys with a motorbike were carried with the water. Then we had a water vendor who was going to check his pipes how are they. He was carried with the water. Okay. So like it was very traumatizing back in 2021.
We visited Kibera Primary School, one of the oldest schools in Nairobi, where children are taught to nurture the earth with their own hands through vertical gardens and small green spaces. They learn how to grow food from little, turn waste into life, save space, and care for the environment that carries their future. We also visited Amani Kibera, a community organization that provides sewing classes for women and support them in developing their own activities. The organization is also building a community space for education and learning. It's one example of how resilience is not only about infrastructure, but also about skills, dignity, and opportunity. In conversation with Mr. Ibrahim Yunis, an elder of the Nubian community, we were invited into the deeper memory of Kibera. His testimony opened a history shaped by land struggles, colonial displacement, exclusion, and generations kept far from the spaces of decision-making. This history still echoes today. Floods in Kibera are not caused by rain alone, but by years of neglect, insecure land, poor urban planning, and the absence of basic infrastructure in a community left unheard for generations.
My name is Ibrahim Yunis Ali. I'm a resident of Kibera and a Nubian who was born here 66 years ago. The Nubians came to Kenya around 1876 and they were brought here by the British colonial administration to come and assist them to manage the colony in East Africa. The Nubians trace their ancestry from the Sudan and Egypt. So when they came here, they were conscripted into the King's African Rifles by the British Imperial East Africa Company, which by then was administering this Kenya, Uganda, and on behalf of the British colonial government. So the Nubians were conscripted to join the King's African Rifles. And they fought in the First and Second World War on behalf of the British. After the war effort, after the First World War, the Nubians were settled here in Kibera. And the word Kibera is actually derived from the Nubi language, which means a forest. So after the war effort in 1918, the British settled the Nubian soldiers in Kibera here. So there were about 355 Nubian soldiers at that time who retired from the army. And they were issued with some documentation to show the ownership. This document is properly known as a Shamba Pass. The word Shamba means farm in Kiswahili. So each soldier who retired was given some acreage of land, ranging from about 8 acres, some even got 20 acres, depending on your seniority in the army and the period of service. At some point, the British made it clear to the Nubians that we are allocating you this land only for you, the soldiers, but you cannot transfer it to your offsprings. And therefore the British told the Nubians, you see, this land is only for you, the Askari, not for your offsprings. You cannot transfer it as a form of inheritance. There was a Carter Land Commission that was established by the British administration around 1928 to look into the land problems of the natives, including the Nubians. So in the Carter Land report, there is a chapter that addresses the Nubian land question. In that report, which is still available in the archives, Carter recommended that should the British colonial administration wish to use the Nubian land for development or any other purpose, they should relocate them and compensate them. Unfortunately, the implementation of the Carter recommendations was not very smoothly done. As the time the British left, the implementation of the Carter Land Commission report was incomplete. So the Kenya government continued building estates in Kibera through the National Housing Corporation. From a large settlement, 13 villages, the Nubians were displaced systematically until now they occupy a very small piece of land known as 288. Now, due to the fact that the Nubians had no land ownership documents, since independence, 70s and 80s, 90s, up to just recently, government officers used to allocate land to whomever they wished. Some Nubians protest, but they had no ability.
They didn't go to court?
Eventually they went to court in the year 2003.
Yes, okay.
They went to the local courts, here, High Court, in 2003 to raise the issue of the land ownership and citizenship status. Unfortunately, at that time, the judicial system in Kenya was not operating well. So they had to withdraw the case and file it at the African Peoples and Human Rights Court in the year 2006. They filed the suit at the African Union Human Rights Court in 2006 and got a favorable ruling on 3 issues. First, on the issue of citizenship, because this was also an issue of contention. The Nubians were having challenges getting citizenship documents like IDs and passports. So the court advised the Kenya government to relax some of the stringent requirements to allow the Nubians get citizenship documents. Number 2, the court advised the Kenya government to recognize Nubian land rights over Kibera. Number 3, the court advised the Kenya government not to effect demolitions against the Nubians. So as a result of that court ruling, the Nubians in 2013 were allocated 288 acres of land. They were given a title. The new administration that came in 2022 entered into a partnership with the Nubian community through the Kibera Nubian Community Land Trust to assist the community develop the land. In fact, a task force was formed comprising of Nubian community members and government officials to develop a master plan and develop strategies on how to develop the land. The task force did its job, but unfortunately, due to wrangling within the community, there were different functions within the community, wrangling over control of the process. So some people went to court and stopped the process, and the court case is still pending. So the Nubians are now still in abeyance. No development can take place until the court case is resolved. In the meantime, there's a lot of encroachment on the land. Land cartels are building permanent houses on Nubian land without permission of the community. God knows how they get authority from government agencies to build on somebody's land without authority. This is also a perplexing question. Somebody will come to your land without your authority, build a permanent house and get away with it. So slowly, the land is being eaten away by encroachers. The time when the Nubians will be ready to develop their land, they will have to evict these people first. And we fear that there could be litigation. So as a result of that, Kibera has remained a slum up to today. There is poor sanitation, no proper infrastructure, poor housing, high levels of poverty, a lot of social ills taking place, drug abuse, alcoholism, crime rate is high. All these challenges as a result of being in an informal settlement. But if this place was to be developed, I can assure you all these problems will go. Even the environmental issues you see around. Growing up in Kibera in the 60s and 70s, Kibera was still basically forested. It was green. Yeah? We used to hunt for birds. Hyenas used to roam around the place. People had nice gardens. It used to rain almost throughout the year. The climate was cool, fresh. We used to drink waters from rainwater. We used to go to rivers. We used to have clean rivers. We used to go to the Nairobi Dam. The water was blue. Systematically, the climate of Kibera has been changing due to the ongoing developments. You see now, once the estates, constructions were coming up, forests were being cleared, that affected the ecosystem of Kibera. The wild animals that were there are no longer there. The birds, we used to see rare species of birds. So the settlements interfered with the flora and fauna, and also because now rural-urban migration, people are coming and plant structures. The Nubis had standards of housing they used to live on. Even if it was mud thatched, it was well prepared. And houses were built in strategic positions. They used to have large fields and compounds. They used to have farms for farming and for grazing. All that was interrupted by the settlements, by people coming in. And that is what affected the climate of Kibera. Kibera now is very hot. It is very hot now. The Nubians were very cultured people. They would never build beyond the next to rivers. Nubians had standards of buildings, and their houses were placed in strategic locations. Right now, here, sometimes, recently there were some fires around. Even for the vehicles to firefighting brigade to get through is not possible. We considered that when developing the master plan for Kibera. We proposed that in the proposed Nubian estate, because we proposed that there will be a Nubian estate named after the 13 Nubian villages. and trees will be planted there. Houses will not be storied building like for the ones being done for affordable housing. Nubians had selected some very nice mansionettes, and this was going to be done on a 50-acre of land. All the Nubians will be accommodated.
We also had the chance to speak on Pamoja FM, a local radio station in Kibera. Through this space, our voices travel further, carrying the message of EU youth cooperation into the heart of the community, where it could be heard, felt, and shared in everyday conversation. Finally, we spoke with journalists, including Emra from Jema Engage Africa and journalists connected to the Kenya Correspondents Association. Media engagement was important because climate advocacy also depends on visibility. Stories need to be heard beyond the communities where they begin.
A key part of the project was to meet decision makers working on climate adaptation. We used these meetings to bring forward what young people had told us, their concerns, their ideas, and their recommendations. Sometimes we spoke on their behalf, and sometimes young people joined the meetings and spoke directly. In Nairobi, we met Dr. Christina Gatura from the Executive Office of the President, who works on marginalized communities. She explained that the government wants to better recognize and support the Nubian community, including through the Ethnic Minorities and Marginalized Communities Bill, which would make it easier for the community to obtain an official code and a recognition. The meeting also opened the door to concrete follow-up ideas: a national conference on marginalized communities, support for youth employment in Kibera, and possible policy initiatives looking at how climate and environmental crises affect marginalized communities, with Kibera as a case study. We also met with Thomas Yatic from the EU Delegation to Kenya. The meeting confirmed the gap between the EU commitments in supporting the green transition and climate resilience in Africa through Global Gateway and the reality on the ground. In fact, we found that no projects are focused on flood preparedness and disaster risk reduction. The delegation explained that part of the EU funding had to be redirected to support the war effort in Ukraine against the Russian aggression, and they had therefore to readjust their plans. We were advised to continue pushing this issue in Brussels, especially for future EU funding. We met with representatives from Makina Ward, the local administration responsible for a part of Kibera. The meeting showed why action is so difficult on the ground. To unblock the drainage channels, some areas will need to be cleared, which means displacing residents. This creates strong tensions between the administration, Kibera residents, and the Nubian community. They recognize that they now avoid entering the slum, a clear failure of public policy. At the same time, garbage collection is not working properly. Waste piles up, the drainage system gets blocked, and this creates health risks when floods come. We met with UN Habitat, based in Nairobi. While they do not directly implement projects on the ground, they provide expertise to urban planners and produce studies. They shared, for example, a very promising framework, Tomorrow's Cities, Urban Risk in Transition. It proposes a methodology where vulnerable populations are associated with decision makers in urban planning. The modeling of climate hazards and their impacts on infrastructure and on people makes risk more tangible, more visual, and helps build communities that are more resilient to climate hazards. Back in Europe, we met with Région Occitanie, the regional authority of the Pyrenees. The meeting was extremely positive. The region offered support to young people from Caramany who have just been elected to the municipal council, through a program that includes the purchase of collective and individual rainwater harvesters. The discussions focused on how the region can best support the preparation and submission of funding requests to the region, to the French state, and to the EU. We also engaged with officials from the African Union Commission. Participants learned how disaster risk reduction governance is organized at African Union level. Most importantly, we learned that the AUC cannot bypass member states and local authorities to engage communities directly. They shared with us the best pathway to advocate and influence the policy process, the Youth Advisory Board on Disaster Risk Reduction. We also engaged with the EU Delegation to the African Union. They told us that the African Youth Charter, adopted in 2006, is going to be reviewed. Today, the Charter does not really address climate action. This review is therefore an important opportunity to push for climate adaptation to be reflected in it. The meeting also helped us understand how to best engage with this process and influence it. Lastly, we had a meeting with DG CLIMA, the European Commission team working on climate adaptation and preparedness. This was a very positive meeting. The official shared with us information on the EU Mission on Adaptation, an EU program that works with 150 communities in Europe to develop solutions to adapt to a changing climate. These projects cover issues such as flood preparedness and drought response, and can serve as useful examples for communities looking for solutions, such as Luchon and Caramany. We also learned about the new European Climate Resilience and Risk Management Framework, expected in 2026, to support member states to implement solutions on climate adaptation. A key outcome is that on floods, it will include elements on improved forecasting through satellite observations, such as Copernicus, and improved climate models. These policy dialogues were extremely positive as they placed our communities on the radar of decision makers and empowered young people by giving them a chance to engage with decision makers directly. They are a first stepping stone towards better climate adaptation in Kibera and the Pyrenees.